Where does your favorite team rank after the NFL draft? What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, back with another NFL Power Rankings video, ranking every NFL team after the 2022 NFL Draft from number 32, that would be dead last, to number 1. This is just my opinion on each team in the NFL and how good I think they are from number 32 to number 1. If that sounds fun, if that sounds interesting, don't forget to spike the like button and subscribe to the channel for more BLV NFL content just like this. Also, let me know in the comments how you feel about your team. Are you confident entering this season or entering training camp? Or are you a little bit down on your team entering the 2022 NFL season? Let me know in the comment section below, and let's roll with my post-draft power rankings. Let's begin my post-draft power rankings at number 32 with the worst team in the NFL. Even after the draft, it still has to be the Houston Texans. I almost feel bad every time I make a video about who's the worst team in the NFL, but it's definitely the Houston Texans still. I'm not the biggest believer in Davis Mills. I think he's fine. I think he can give a little excitement to see what he's going to be in year 2, but is he a franchise quarterback? I'm not quite sold. I need to see a lot more this season. I just don't know if he has the talent to be a superstar quarterback in this league. But at least the roster is shaping up in a nice way. I like what they did, adding to the offensive line with Kenyon Green in this draft, protecting Davis Mills, and hopefully getting some of that run game going. Speaking of run game, adding Pierce to that stable of running backs, I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes their starting running back down the road. You add John Mechie to complement a Brandon Cooks, and right away he will be probably your number 2 option in the receiving game. Defensively, I wasn't an absolutely huge fan of going corner with the 3rd pick, but we know that the ceiling is very high there. Now, Lovie Smith, I want to see how he fully operates as head coach with full command of this team. We know he has plenty of experience, but has the game passed him by? That is a question. Their defense, a lot of vets with not a ton of talent, and they still leave a lot to be desired overall in the talent department. So I think the Texans, just like last year, they'll fight. They'll give some teams a game. They'll surprise some folks, but they are the worst team in terms of talent, in terms of the combination of coach and quarterback, and they should be at the top of the draft once again next year. But be patient, Texans fans. It's coming. My number 31 team in the NFL after the draft is the Atlanta Falcons. With Marcus Mariota at quarterback, I just don't have much faith in the Falcons to win many games this year. There's absolutely no way they are more talented than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the New Orleans Saints, and I would also say that the Carolina Panthers are a step ahead of the Falcons in terms of this rebuilding stuff. Matt Ryan is gone, which means you're really into the first season and off-season of a new era. Matt Ryan was so successful, brought you a lot of great years with the Atlanta Falcons, but you have to say goodbye and you have to move on to the next era. You don't have that quarterback yet. Is it Desmond Ridder is the question. Personally, I don't think it will be, but I don't hate taking a shot at a quarterback. You look at who you got in the first round with Drake London, who I think is going to really help this offense with his size, his contested catch ability, and his versatility to win after the catch. And you can move him around outside, inside, a nice complement to Kyle Pitts in year 1. I think he's going to be a good receiver. The offensive line still needs some work, but it's not absolutely downright atrocious. So there's that. The defense, I think, has some young, promising talent. They added more in this draft. So I want to see how Dean Pease takes it to the next level schematically with that defense. I wouldn't be surprised if this defense surprises some people this year, but the offense is a far ways away, especially at quarterback, from being anywhere near effective. So Atlanta, I like the coaching staff, I like the direction, but they've got a long rebuild to go. My number 30 team in the NFL post-draft is the Chicago Bears. Now, this might be slightly surprising to you Bears fans. Don't attack me in the comments. But the Bears, honestly, on both sides of the football, they just don't have a lot of upper echelon talent and talent in general. I mean, you lost so many big names and superstar playmakers on the defensive side of the football, including Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks this offseason. I just don't know where your direction is heading right now. I understand that you had to kind of restructure the cap and let go of some vets to rebuild, but Justin Fields is kind of being left out to dry, so to speak, because offensively, he's not getting much help here throughout this offseason on the offensive line for protection or through the receiving core for options to throw the football to. So if the Bears are going to be better than I think, it's going to have to be on the shoulders and the shoulder of Justin Fields to make magic happen. I just don't know if it's gonna happen. Defensively, you're certainly going to take a step back, although you got younger and more promising in the secondary throughout the top of the draft this year. The Bears, I think, are in order for a down season, but I feel like if they can really work towards getting this roster ready for next offseason, they could start to plug away and make some moves to get Justin Fields to the playoffs. My number 29 NFL team post-draft is the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks had plenty of picks to do some damage and help their roster, and they did address many of their needs. I thought this was one of the better drafts the Seahawks have had in quite a while. I really liked the Cross pick. I thought that was a value in the top 10. I thought they did good work in addressing their pass rush with Boye Mafe, as well as getting somebody like Abraham Lucas to be also potentially a starting tackle. But they are missing some of that veteran presence at the tackle position to protect Drew Lock or whoever the quarterback is going to be. Maybe it's even Geno Smith, according to Pete Carroll, which is really where I'm concerned, and this is really where this team lacks. They're not going to have a quarterback anywhere near the talents and the experience of Russell Wilson, who, in my opinion, has been carrying this football team for many seasons. The receiving core is still strong. You've got to think about paying DK Metcalf, especially if he goes off with a subpar quarterback. Defensively, I think that they have done a good job of bringing in some veterans to keep it afloat, but I don't feel like it's anywhere near the good or elite territory that it needs to be to carry a bad quarterback, especially in a tougher NFC division. The Seahawks are going to suffer this season and likely be the worst team in their division at number 29. The number 28 team in the NFL post-draft is the Jacksonville Jags. Trevor Lawrence did not get much help in the draft. Now, I understand Jags fans will say, Mitch, they gave him help in the free agency period. But I will say this to you. They did not get players I like at wide receiver. Christian Kirk got overpaid. Zay Jones is a number 3 at best. Laviska Shenault, I'm not sure if he even exists anymore. The offensive line is definitely subpar, and they did not address it throughout the draft. I feel like Jacksonville is going to have to rely on more of a running game this year, and Doug Peterson isn't really known for much of a running game. Travis Etienne, I want to see what he looks like off the injury. Defensively, though, I think they could be promising and actually underrated. They've improved in the secondary. They've improved at the second level at linebacker. I have 2 very promising players there. And on the defensive line, they added a big-time pass rusher with the first overall pick in Trayvon Walker. So Jacksonville's defense could actually be real again, but their offense, even if Trevor Lawrence improves, is a far ways away from being impressive. So Trevor Lawrence is really going to have to live up to the billing of what we thought he was going to be, or what a lot of Jags fans hoped he would be, if they're going to be successful and a surprise team this year. The number 27 team post-draft is the Carolina Panthers. Now, the Panthers did not get the quarterback that will start day one for them, like many thought they would this offseason. But they did address their other huge need, which was the offensive line. And they arguably added the best offensive lineman in Ekwonu in the first round of this draft. That gives them two very good and reliable tackles to deal with. They also addressed the interior O-line throughout free agency. Their defense was already pretty strong. They have a pretty good corner group, a pretty strong front four, and overall, a team that has the makings to surprise in a weak NFC. But the question is, do they have the play at quarterback? And ultimately, I don't think Sam Darnold is the answer. He's what's holding this team back, in my opinion. But I do really love the draft pick of Matt Corral, who I think could be the future of Carolina. So the Panthers are my number 27 team, but they do have a lot of upside. My number 26 team post-draft is surprisingly the Detroit Lions. Yes, the Detroit Lions are not in the bottom three. So congratulations to Lions fans. You are getting steadily better. You're heading in the right direction. And honestly, if you had a better quarterback, let's just say you had Matthew Stafford right now, you could be flirting with the playoffs. I'm not even going to lie here. Like, the Lions are not that bad on paper. Their offensive line is pretty strong, and I wouldn't argue that they're not a top 10 unit. They have some weapons now, with Jameson Williams being a true number one, DJ Chark having the upside to be a number one. We've seen it before, at least a high-end number two. St. Brown being a very nice number three, if not a number two himself. TJ Hawkinson being an elite tight end. DeAndre Swift being a nice dual threat running back. This team has the weaponry for Jared Goff to succeed behind a good offensive line. And if they can make Jared Goff succeed, honestly, Jared Goff isn't even that awful. There are certainly worse starters in this league that I've already really discussed here. But Jared Goff can be serviceable enough for this team to be competitive. Defensively, they still leave a little bit to be desired in the back end. I do think they need some help there still moving forward, but they've done a lot to improve their front seven throughout the draft, including the number 2 overall pick and Aiden Hutchinson. The Lions might actually have a real pass rush this year, which they haven't had in quite some time. So Detroit is back to being on my good side and being pretty promising. At number 25, I have the New York Giants. The Giants might not look like a team that has a lot of upside, but when you factor in all the variables, the Giants are a team that could shock a lot of people this season. Due to the fact that their coaching staff was an utter trash can disaster last year, by far the worst coaching staff in the NFL, they will just immensely get better by bringing in one of the best offensive minds in Brian Daboll and one of the best defensive minds in Wink Martindale, and you can already sense a different vibe within the organization. I think the Giants are in for a much better year this year, at least in terms of what looks promising for the future. Daniel Jones is still a massive question mark, but he has shown the talent to make plays, make throws, and even run the ball successfully. I believe in him to have a fairly solid year this year in his first season under Brian Daboll. Saquon Barkley, I think, could have a massive bounce back year behind a rejuvenated and revamped offensive line. Andrew Thomas being on the left, and now my favorite offensive line prospect, Evan Neal, being their right tackle. They also improved the interior throughout free agency. They have plenty of weapons. I expect Kadarius Toney to hang around and succeed in this offense. And Kenny Golladay might also be rejuvenated because the offensive line can protect and Golladay can actually get down the field now. Defensively, they're stronger up front with Kayvon Thibodeau being one of their pass rushers on the edge. And I know Wink has a plan for that back end, and I'm intrigued to see if James Bradbury sticks around in the back end, but I think the plan is that he will now post-draft, and that's a pretty good secondary for sure. It was already pretty strong. So the Giants, in, again, another team, a weak NFC, could take advantage if they can get above par play from Daniel Jones, stay healthy this season, and the coaching staff can just improve on a already decently talented roster. At number 24, we're sticking in New York, or for some, New Jersey. The Jets are probably my crush team in terms of they're young, but they have so much talent. I feel like the Jets are being supremely underrated as a dark horse team this season. The Jets offensively have all the makings of being explosive. Zach Wilson is entering his second year, and he looks hungry to prove people wrong and improve. I love the Breece Hall pick to thrive off of this LaFleur offense in the running game, forming a nice tandem with Michael Carter in the backfield. The offensive line is very quietly one of the more talented units in the NFL as long as Mekhi Becton can keep his weight under control. The wide receiving core is underrated as well. Corey Davis is a very nice number 2 receiver when he complements a number 1. And I think a number 1 here is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson can be the number 1 to Corey Davis's number 2 now. Elijah Moore is another guy that could have a breakout season, and I really like Braxton Berrios, especially as a complementary number 4 as a slot receiver. They improved the tight end position, and their defense is for real, especially up front. They've got a killer defensive line. Jermaine Johnson now that they added through the draft on the opposite side of Carl Lawson, who didn't play last year because of injury. You got John Franklin Myers and Quinnen Williams, CJ Mosley behind that, a secondary that will add more talent with Whitehead and Reed. I think the Jets are for real, man. They are a very talented young team. I'm not sure they have the coaching, and I'm not sure they're ready yet, but they will be ready soon, and I think they're headed in a really nice direction. At number 23, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I think Steelers fans are still kind of holding on for them to be a playoff caliber team, but I don't think they are post Ben Roethlisberger this year. We saw it with the Saints last year. We saw it with the Patriots when they lost Tom Brady. When you lose a Hall of Fame quarterback, you can think that you're still a good team and a good roster. But the thing is with that you oftentimes overvalue the players on your team and overvalue the talent because perhaps even at their older age, those quarterbacks are propping up some of your playmakers and some of your players on both sides of the field. Just not having that experience at quarterback is certainly going to hurt. I do think they have tried to improve the offensive line, although I was not impressed by their game plan throughout the draft. They took a lot of risk at wide receiver with George Pickens, but it could pay off as potentially a number 3 receiver behind Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. I love Pat Freiermuth. Harris as well is going to have another solid year in terms of his production. Defensively, they're pretty strong still, but their secondary could definitely improve through maybe a couple more signings. I saw that they signed DeMonte KZ at free safety, which will help in the rotation. Defensively, though, the Steelers, are going to be strong under Mike Tomlin. They still got a very good pass rush and a strong front seven, so they're going to be in games. I'm just not sure they got the quarterback to capitalize off of it and the savviness anymore at that position to be able to win more games than they should, which is what happened last year. So the Steelers are a below average team, but still a team that's going to give every team a tough time. My number 22 team is the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are commanding my number 22 spot because they're actually kind of deceptively talented, but I just don't really know what to think about Carson Wentz. On another new team, I'm just not sold on Carson Wentz when it comes to leading a team to the promised land, leading them to the playoffs. I just feel like Carson Wentz needs to be propped up, especially at this point in his career. I'm not sure if Washington has enough to do so. I think their offense is solid. They added another talented receiver throughout the draft in Jahan Dotson, and they've got some playmakers, there's no doubt, right? They bring back McKissick to go with Gibson, and they've got Logan Thomas and Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel. So they have enough really to make plays. The offensive line feels like it's underrated every year. Defensively, they could really move back to that 2020 form with their defensive line being healthy once again, in the secondary perhaps improving on last year's performance. But Washington just feels like a pretty average team for the most part. Maybe a team that can make more noise in a weak NFC than we think, but it just doesn't get me that excited, to be honest with you. At number 21, the Tennessee Titans. The Titans certainly took a massive step back this offseason. I felt like they lost talent on the offensive line. I felt like losing A.J. Brown puts them in the wrong direction. When they were the number one seed in the AFC, a contender last year, I think they've done everything in their power to move back in my mind. Ryan Tannehill and the way he ended last season, I think did that really for a lot of people. Derrick Henry coming off an injury. I know that he was back in the playoffs last year. He didn't look like the same player at that point. Will he be back to prime form, or will he for the first time take a step back? That's a question for sure. How is Robert Woods going to be off an injury? So there's a lot of questions offensively. I didn't really love the scheme, and that's still a huge concern. Defensively, I think they're solid and perhaps even underrated, but not game-changing. So the Titans just feel like, with Mike Vrabel, a tough, hard-nosed team, and kind of like Washington, not super exciting this year, not a team that gets your blood boiling. I think they're going to be average, but nothing special. At the number 20 spot is the Arizona Cardinals, a team that might get your blood boiling in terms of Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown. Hollywood has invaded Arizona, but Zona to me is just very, very sketchy in terms of depth purposes. On both defense and offense, their offensive line still needs a lot of work on the interior, and that's going to cost them some games. To protect Kyler Murray, they have more weaponry this year. I think Marquise Brown gives them a legitimate downfield threat and speed option. D-Hop being back as that intermediate killer is going to be awesome and the go-to guy in contested catch situations for Kyler Murray. James Conner got paid way too much money, but he was productive last year. Zach Ertz, and you also add a talented tight end in the draft. It's going to make it interesting to see what Cliff Kingsbury can do to evolve his offense, because it feels like it's getting stale at times. Defensively, they're still just way far away from being good. I feel like the secondary is not very good besides Budda Baker, and the front seven lost Chandler Jones, who is perhaps their biggest playmaker, and we know JJ Watt's only getting older and only getting more injured. So the Cardinals, I feel like, even though they made the playoffs last year, I think I'm taking a step back on them this year. Drama as well around Kyler Murray, which doesn't help this situation. I have Arizona at number 20. At number 19, the New England Patriots. My Patriots come in at number 19. It's a weird thing for me with the Patriots. I feel like they're good enough to get me excited for the season, but they're also bad enough for me to understand that I'm probably going to have my heart broken this year. I wasn't super pumped about the draft, specifically taking a guard in the first round and the numerous reaches that they did make as a team, but I am excited about them adding some overall speed, drafting the fastest wide receiver in the draft and the fastest running back in the draft. That is nice. The offensive line is still going to be strong, with Strange taking over for Shaq Mason and getting Trent Brown back. The tight ends are still there and have another year in the system. And what I really believe is that Mac Jones is going to take a massive step with all the rapport he has built and will build with this receiving core. I think Kendrick Bourne could be in for an upgrade. I think Devontae Parker has a chip on his shoulder. I love the running back room, and Ramondre Stevenson is a serious threat as a 3-down running back. And then you look at the defense. I don't know how good it is. I feel like a lot of it is going to have to come down to Belichick magic, as they no longer have a number one corner, and I don't remember the last time the Patriots defense didn't have a legitimate number one corner, but they've got a lot of different playmakers on the back end. They have arguably the deepest safety position in the league, and a front seven that is young and hungry. So the Patriots are intriguing still. They've got the best coach of all time and a young quarterback that's only improving. So they're kind of a wild card in this really competitive AFC. My number 18 team in the NFL post-draft is the New Orleans Saints. I do question the Saints post Sean Payton and what the offense is going to look like, but I think their coaching staff is good enough, and their roster especially, I have enough faith in for them to be competitive in a weaker NFC and likely finish second in their division, even though they'll likely sweep the Bucs for like the 18th year in a row. Jameis Winston is the quarterback. Hopefully he can stay healthy this year and prove himself as a starter once again, but I am a little bit shaky on how elite he can be in moments. He was very conservative last year, and almost too conservative, from going from the Bucs, where he threw a bunch of picks, to the Saints, where he was just dunking the ball down and dipping it down to Alvin Kamara. But you add a big speed threat and a route running threat in Chris Olave to complement the returning Michael Thomas, and that should be very promising on top of Alvin Kamara returning again, and Taysom Hill taking on full snaps at tight end. I'm not even joking. He could be pretty good there. He's a really good athlete. Offensive line shouldn't be as good as it has been in the past with Armstead leaving, but you do get a first-round pick to replace him and remain pretty strong in that department. Defensively, I still think they're one of the better defenses in the NFL thanks to both coaching and talent on all levels. They've got productive pass rushers, they've got good run stuffers, they've been just a really good run stuffing team, and they've got cornerbacks as well, adding another in the draft. So the Saints are still a really well-rounded roster and should compete for a playoff spot this year. At number 17, the Miami Dolphins. I think Dolphins fans are a little bit too excited for this team. I do think they're talented, but I have major question marks about the quarterback and the coach. I just don't think Tua is going to be able to get the Dolphins to where they want to go this year, and I'm still a little bit shaky about the offense coming together with the offensive line perhaps being improved, but maybe not as improved as people would expect or think. The run game should be better under Mike McDaniel, but I question how the overall team is going to perform without Brian Flores there, who I felt gave them a ton of edge in their game and a toughness that's hard to quantify. Defensively, that's where you'll see the biggest decline in terms of schematics and in terms of game planning. I thought Brian Flores brought a lot to the table. They still will run the same system and they still have the same talent, but I question if they'll be the same defense. So Tyreek Hill is amazing. I love Jalen Waddle. I think this team is very talented on both sides of the ball. They've got plenty of talent at premier positions such as receiver, corner, pass rush, but I just don't know if they're going to form as one cohesive whole this year under a new coach. At number 16, the Minnesota Vikings. I feel the Vikings are close to a lock for the playoffs in this NFC this year, being that they have one of the better quarterbacks, yes, I said it, in this conference, Kirk Cousins, and a steady, reliable option at that position, on top of having plenty of playmakers to go along with it. Justin Jefferson's arguably the best in football at his position. Adam Thielen is an excellent player still. Dalvin Cook is still a breakaway speed threat at running back, and their defense greatly improved this offseason. Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter being their pass rushers is very impressive, on top of bringing in a run stuffer like Harrison Phillips and linebacker Hicks. And then on top of that, you improve your secondary through the draft with Andrew Booth, who I thought was a first-round corner, getting him in the second round, and then seeing a winner from Georgia who's going to bring energy to the safety position and perhaps reinvigorate Harrison Smith. So the Vikings are pretty well-rounded overall. Fairly young and unknown on defense, but I do feel they're going to be decently strong there. And the offense can score and move the ball with most offenses in football. So the Vikings are going to be a tough team to play, and I do feel like they're going to be a pretty good one this year. My number 15 team post-draft is the Dallas Cowboys. And I understand that Cowboys fans might be a little bit upset with this ranking, but that's the way I see it. I feel like the Cowboys are worse off than they were a year ago in terms of talent. But I will say this, they're more reliable because they have less questions. We kind of know what they are on both sides of the ball. But I will say they're a little bit fluky on the defensive side of the football with all the turnovers that they caused. They were very unreliable in that department, and oftentimes when they didn't cause turnovers, they got shredded. But they do have some components defensively that make you really excited. Obviously, Micah Parsons, obviously DeMarcus Lawrence, obviously Trevon Diggs. They've got a safety position with Curse leading the way that I think is underrated, but I do feel the defense could take a step back in terms of just forcing so many turnovers and getting big plays. Offensively, they're not as talented as they were on the offensive line or at wide receiver, but they've tried to recoup those things throughout the draft. So the Cowboys feel like they're going to take a step back this year, but perhaps next year could take another step forward towards potentially a championship with Dak Prescott. At number 14, the Philadelphia Eagles. Yes, the Eagles are my top team in the NFC East. I do think this is going to be a little bit of a hot take, but after the draft, I think they did enough to catapult themselves above the Cowboys. Don't forget that the Eagles did make the playoffs last year. I know it was as a 7 seed, but they did make the playoffs. I do feel they're back on their way towards the playoffs once again. A.J. Brown just opens up this offense immensely. A.J. Brown is a superstar receiver. He's one of the 10 best receivers in the NFL. His size is going to really help Jalen Hurts in contested catch situations, and his ability to create after the catch is going to make life easy on the quarterback. Devontae Smith, it's also going to help him because he more moves into a number 2 role as opposed to a number 1 role. Don't forget Dallas Goedert, who's one of my favorite well-rounded tight ends, and Miles Sanders, who is really explosive as a running back. This team will remain a very productive running team with the threat of Jalen Hurts' legs. They've got a strong offensive line, so offensively they should only grow from where they were. Defensively, the same can be argued. While I'm not a huge fan of the scheme, the defensive line being that damn good is going to be something special and hard to stop and hard to block. In the run game, they're big, they're powerful, they're hard to move, especially with Jordan Davis there now. And in the pass rushing department, Brandon Graham coming back and Hassan Reddick is really going to provide a boost to getting to the quarterback. Secondary is still kind of suspect. Linebackers, still kind of suspect, even with Nakobe Dean coming through the draft. But I do think that defensive line is going to give a lot of teams fits, and the offense is going to be potentially pretty dynamic. So the Eagles are my favorite team in the NFC East as of right now, even though that possibly is a hot take. My number 13 team post-draft is the Cleveland Browns. The reason I have the Browns at number 13 is I just don't really know what we're going to get from Deshaun Watson. I don't know how many games we're going to get from Deshaun Watson this season. I fully expect him to get suspended. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that if he doesn't get suspended, I will not be happy. And I do feel that will be ridiculous. So I do feel the guy needs to get suspended. I'm just going to say that. I don't care what you think. Okay? The Cleveland Browns, overall, though, as a football team, have talent. Now, I do think they are overrated in some departments. I think they're overrated in terms of skill talent. I don't think they have much at wide receiver or really any other department there. I like their running backs, okay? Don't get me wrong. Nick Chubb's great, and Kareem Hunt is also very good. Tight end, I mean, David Njoku's nice. I don't think he's elite. And their other receivers, I think Amari Cooper is a little bit overrated, and I do think they don't have much at number 2 or number 3. Offensive line is good and strong in one of the strongest areas of their team, if not the strongest. But the defensive line is an area where I still think they need to add some players. Potentially Jadeveon Clowney, who's not on the roster right now, could come back to Cleveland, and that would really give me a lot more confidence. But I'm confused why they haven't added to the interior defensive line, an area where I think they can really improve, and they've been pushed around. The secondary and just overall the scheme in the passing game gives me some frustration. I feel like it's a more talented secondary than the scheme makes it out to be, and you pay Denzel Ward. I hope they shift towards more man coverage this year and try to go that approach as opposed to such zone-heavy approaches of the past. So we'll see what the Browns do. I do think that they're good, but I don't think they're really elite or the contender that they might think they are inside that building now that they have Deshaun Watson. My number 12 team post-draft is the Indianapolis Colts. I like the Colts for many of the reasons that I like the Browns, but I just feel like the Colts are more defined. Matt Ryan at quarterback, I know what I'm going to get. I'm going to get a steady presence for all 17 games, a smart quarterback who's going to make good decisions. He's going to be accurate with the football. And for the first time in a while, I have somebody I can rely on when I'm betting on games and watching games and rooting for the Colts in these games. Then you look at the offensive line, which might not be as good as it was a couple years ago, but we saw Jonathan Taylor rip up the NFL with a quarterback who really wasn't threatening as a passing component. So you combine Matt Ryan's passing ability with that ability to run the football down people's throats, it's going to be difficult to defend just right there alone. On top of that, you add a number 2 receiver in the draft with Alec Pierce, who I think has vertical ability that can get down the field and stretch it and open it up for Michael Pittman and also win contested footballs for Matt Ryan. So I do think the Colts got better at wide receiver, but they're not phenomenal. They're far from it. So I think they could still add a veteran in that department, potentially Julio Jones, the former teammate of Matt Ryan. Defensively, I actually think this is a low-key area where they got a lot better. I think specifically with Stephon Gilmore, it makes them a lot more well-rounded in the secondary, and I feel like they can play more man coverage if they want to. Gus Bradley is going to make them a tough team to beat, maybe a predictable defense, but they've got a lot of talent on the D line. It's a pretty deep D line. It's a talented linebacking group. They're perfectly built for his defense, and I think Gilmore puts them a little bit over the top as a top 10, top 5 defense in this league. So the Colts, with just a well-rounded roster, good coaching staff, and now a solid quarterback, I think they're a dangerous team this year. My number 11 team in the NFL post-draft, I've moved them down quite a bit because I just don't know a lot of this team right now. I don't know what's going on in that building. I don't know, and I can't rely on it at the moment. So I'm being a little bit conservative with my ranking. It's the San Francisco 49ers. First off, who's the quarterback? Can you please answer that question for me? John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, somebody, Lenny B. Somebody answer that question who's in charge of the 49ers. Who is the quarterback? Is it my guy, Jimmy G, Garoppolo, or is it Trey Lance? And at the end of the day, I don't know how much faith I have in Trey Lance. I just don't know. Kyle Shanahan, I love you, man. I love you. But you lost my guy, Wes Welker. I'm just trying to be funny a little bit. That's just my way of making a joke. But Kyle Shanahan, I love you. I think you carry this team a lot of the time. I just don't know what I'm getting from your quarterback, and I don't know how much you can carry this team no longer. I think you need a quarterback, bro. I think you need a quarterback. And then if you lose Deebo Samuel, I don't know what you're going to do. Deebo Samuel is the heart and soul of this football team at the end of the day. And I love George Kittle. I love Brandon Ayuk, but you really don't have a weapon that can replace him at the end of the day. Alex Mack, are you retiring? Can you please tell me? I don't know if you're retiring or not. Defensively, I think you're fairly strong, but you're not like elite, where to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, locked and loaded top 3 defense. Yeah, you got a good pass rush. You're a very deep defensive line. It's very impressive. I mean, I love depth. And then you've got a linebacking core that's good and a secondary that I think is probably improved, but is Jaquiski Tartt coming back? Can somebody also answer that question? So as you can see, there's a theme here. I just have a lot of questions. Can somebody answer the damn questions for me? It's that time of year once again. Underdog Fantasy is back. Underdog Fantasy, you guys know, it's my favorite place to play fantasy, especially this summer, because Best Ball Mania 3, it's the biggest Best Ball Mania of all time. I love Best Ball, specifically on Underdog Fantasy, because there's no in-season commitment. You don't gotta worry about it, man. No trades, no waivers. You just have fun drafting your team. So right now, Underdog Fantasy will double your first deposit up to $100 when you use my promo code BLV. That is underdogfantasy.com. You can get it on your phone, in the App Store. It's phenomenal. I love the app. It's easy to use. Best Ball Mania 3, 10 million in prizes right now. Use the promo code BLV. That is promo code BLV and double your first deposit up to $100. I will see you there. Let's have fun this summer playing some fantasy football. Entering the top 10, at number 10, I got the Baltimore Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson, the Great 8. Lamar is still an elite quarterback, no matter how many people may call him a running back. Just ignore them, because those people are stupid. Anyways, the Baltimore Ravens are good. But are they great is the question. I just have questions about the receiving core. When Marquise Brown leaves, who is by far the most productive receiver, is Rashad Bateman going to replace that production? And who's going to replace the potential of Rashad Bateman as the number 2? So I believe they need to go out and sign a vet. Who's that going to be? Who's it going to be? You let me know, okay? Julio, you going there? Odell, you going there? Who's going there? Steve Smith coming back, Anquan Bolden, 2012. Let me know, okay? But the Baltimore Ravens offensive line is back. Tyler Linderbaum makes that unit really good, potentially really powerful, and that run game with those running backs back, really frightening. So they're going to get back to that 2 tight end offense. with some running game, with some Lamar Jackson magic. Defensively, Wink Martindale leaving, to me, that's a definite big red flag. But you've got some talent there, and by far a much better, more talented team after the injuries. Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, definite upgrade at safety, man. And Kyle Hamilton's going to be intriguing because you could use him at linebacker, you could use him at nickel. So a lot of things you could do with him. On top of that, Marcus Peters will be back, picking off passes for touchdowns. And the front seven can only improve, I think, based on last year where, there was some growing pains with the pass rush. So the Ravens are a playoff team to me. They could win their division this year. I just don't know about the passing game because at the end of the day in the playoffs, you're going to need to pass the ball a ton to win at least one of these games. And with such lackluster weapons in that department, I don't know if you're able to do that against the elite teams in the AFC. At number 9, the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm not really wavering with my love for the Raiders. I sent multiple texts to my buddies this weekend after a absolutely atrocious draft by the New England Patriots, where I said I'm a Raiders fan. And I'm kind of not joking about that. Like, I love the Raiders. I love the greatness of the Raiders. I'm going to be making a Raiders video about Josh McDaniels. You know it's coming, so get ready for it. But the Raiders, man, I just keep thinking about how dynamic they're going to be on offense. I just really think the Raiders are going to be super tough to stop. If the Raiders are not a top 5 scoring offense this year, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something, okay? Because the Raiders are going to be a top 5 scoring offense, and you better take that to the bank. Josh McDaniels is going to make Derek Carr an MVP candidate. And Derek Carr is a good quarterback. I think he could have a great season. Devontae Adams is going to be phenomenal. He's great. Hunter Renfrow is still slept on. Like, this guy, I know that a lot of NFL fans know how good he is, but I feel like his look just makes him like 10 times worse in the people's minds. But then they watch him play and it's like, yeah, this guy's really good. Darren Waller is not going anywhere. He's really good. Josh Jacobs is really good. They got a lot of running backs. I think they improved the offensive line through the draft, and I think they have enough players there that they can make it work with 5. The defense, I think, is a lot better than given credit for. First off, they've got a lot better coaching. They get the defensive coordinator from New York, the Giants. Go do your research on that. And you look at this defense, and the corner group, I think, is underrated. I think the linebackers have improved with Jayon Brown. I think the pass rush will be better more consistently with Chandler Jones complementing Max Crosby. And I think they're going to be more versatile and hybrid this year, which is going to give teams like the Chiefs more problems than they did in the past. So a lot of problems defensively for the Raiders. They had the talent last year. A lot of the problems were schematically. So I think that's going to improve greatly. I think the Raiders are better than a lot of people think, and I'm betting on the Raiders this year. My number 8 team post-draft is Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers, I think, should be happy after this draft. I know that he didn't get a first-round receiver, but he did get my favorite player in the NFL draft, Christian Watson. By the way, shout out to you guys for the support on that video, man. It means a lot. Thank you so much. Legitimately, thank you. But Aaron Rodgers got Christian Watson and Dobbs as well. That could be explosive on top of the veteran guys that they got, Randall Cobb, Sammy Watkins, Amari Rodgers, Winfrey. They've got enough receivers there to make it work with such a great quarterback. And really, when you look at it, I just couldn't move Aaron Rodgers outside the top 10. I think they're closer to a top 5 team, but I just didn't see the true number 1 receiver for year 1. Maybe it's Christian Watson right away. He's still a little bit raw, so I wouldn't put all those expectations on him. Tight end, I think's back with Robert Tonyan. I still think's quality. And then offensive line is sneaky good with some depth. The defense is actually really strong. I think a lot of people are going to sleep on how good this Packers defense is and might be my go-to fantasy defense this year. They've got a strong secondary, especially cornerback position. They've got a better linebacking crew now with the first-round pick, Quay Walker, added to the group of Devondre Campbell and Barnes. And then on the D-line, Kenny Clark gets a partner in crime with Devontae Wyatt, and Rashawn Gary's a beast. So I feel like the Packers defensively are going to be as strong as anyone on paper. Coaching, I'm not quite sure, but Matt LaFleur is going to figure some stuff out offensively. Aaron Rodgers is going to do his thing. They're going to win the division. They're going to make the playoffs, and ultimately we'll see from there. I don't know if they have enough elite talent on offense to get it done, but they will be competitive in January. My number 7 team in the NFL post-draft, and for whatever reason, this team is getting like this weird like lack of hype, like this weird like, nah, they're really not that good. But then you sit down and you go through their roster position by position and you're like, this is good, check mark, that's great. This is phenomenal. Oh, and by the way, they've got Russell Wilson, who is going to be getting a gold jacket. Like, this is Russell Wilson. Have I ever told you the story about how Russell Wilson does not lose? Have I ever told you that story? Well, that story will commence. It will once again happen in Denver, okay? Russell Wilson's going to make magic. That's what he does, okay? Russell Wilson is going to make this organization better. I love the direction of the management. I think it's very good. Now, my biggest questions about the team is the coaching. I'm not sure how great the coaching is on either side of the ball, and I do have questions there, but I just think this team is so talented with such a great quarterback that I don't know if it really matters. And to be honest with you, can Russell Wilson be in a worse offense than he was in Seattle? Like, that's absolutely no. Like, it's not possible. So you've got a breakout running back candidate in Javonte Williams. You've got a sneaky, solid offensive line. You've got a deep receiving core who's yet to be unlocked. You've got a defense that is as good on paper as any defense in the NFL, especially the back end of the defense. So I think the Broncos are strong and well-rounded and everything I like about a football team for the most part here outside of coaching. The number 6 NFL team post-draft is the Kansas City Chiefs. They've moved up quite a bit post-draft because they've mission accomplished with that draft. I gave them an A+. They really improved and they put themselves right back into the conversation. Their offensive line we knew could already play, and they needed receivers. So they add Sky Moore, who I'm an absolute big fan of. Is he going to be like a locked and loaded number 1 from day one? Probably not, but when you have other complementary options such as Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who you signed, and Juju Smith-Schuster, who you signed, and Mecole Hardman, who you already had, that's enough speed and playmaking ability and reliability and depth, even actually better depth than you had before when you had Tyreek Hill, that makes it promising. And I feel like Mahomes could have run a spread offense with those 4 receivers and make things happen. On top of that, Ronald Jones adds a little bit of power to the running back group. Travis Kelce is still really good at what he does. Defensively, I think they could be stronger by the end of the year. I do have my questions about how that's going to go down at the beginning, but the defensive line with George Karlaftis, I think, adds a legitimate number 2 pass rusher there to Chris Jones. I feel like they're still kind of weak on defense, but they're young, and I feel like Spagnuolo can coach them up. Like Cook at safety, you get Leo Chanel at linebacker, and you get McDuffie at corner. I kind of regret saying this. I don't want to say it, but you guys are still good. And it kind of sucks because I wanted you guys to suck this year. Chiefs Kingdom, I'm just going to be honest. Nah, I'm just kidding. You weren't going to suck. You have Patrick Mahomes, you have Andy Reid. For that, you're at least top 10, but I think what they did in the draft made them back close to flirting with that top 5. At number 5 is the Los Angeles Chargers, who to me are the favorites for the AFC West, although I don't think Vegas reflects that. I still think it's the Chiefs. But I like the Chargers, and the reason is Justin Herbert is an absolute baller supreme, so that's first and foremost. Brandon Staley is entering his 2nd year. I think that is absolutely huge. On top of also the offensive coordinator and the offensive scheme and the defensive scheme. So this team will just have more chemistry. There's such a big jump, going from year 1 to year 2 with the familiarity of how you want your team to play and how the players see your system and how they know it and how they familiarize themselves with it. So 2nd year is huge in terms of how much better the Chargers could be inside those systems. And the teaching can take a next step. And the offensive line, I do think is still a question on the right side, but you add Zion Johnson, who right away is going to be very reliable at right guard. Left guard is there and already very nice. Wide receiving core is good. I wouldn't say it's great, but you got 2 number 1s there. Austin Eckler is explosive, and I like the addition of Isaiah Spiller as a backup. I do think that the offense is going to score with a lot of teams. They're just very tough to stop because of Justin Herbert and his right arm, on top of having a fair amount of balance as well. Defensively, I think that's really where their X factor lies. Like, the pass rushing of Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, on top of the new run-stopping duo inside of Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day, is going to make this team a lot better on defense. So the defense was already pretty good against the pass last year, but the run defense was so atrocious that it made them really tough to rely on week in, week out. But I think they're built to stop some of the best AFC teams, with JC Jackson on the perimeter, with Asante Samuel, with also Michael Davis. They added a safety in the draft, Nasir Adderley, Derwin James. I do think their linebackers could still use an addition, but I do feel like the Chargers, with the upside that their defense has in Brandon Staley's second year and Justin Herbert at quarterback, is just too good to ignore, despite some of my questions about areas of their team and their depth concerns that I do have in certain moments. So the Chargers, I just feel, in terms of their upside of a well-rounded roster, it is there. My number 4 team in the NFL post-draft is the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm putting the Bengals back on the pedestal here. The Bengals, I feel, are kind of getting slept on right now because, yes, they made the Super Bowl last year, and yes, it was darn fluky. But they're actually better now than they were then, which is why I'm kind of high on them at number 4. I think they deserve to be placed here after their run in the playoffs, and that they proved that Joe Burrow is clutch and that this team can really play with the big boys. Jamar Chase is arguably going to be the best receiver in the NFL. He might not be there yet, but he's going to get there. Like, we know this, right? This year, he might take over, right? T. Higgins is very good. And then you got Tyler Boyd, who's also darn good. And you got Joe Mixon. He's also really good at football. The offensive line, you guys don't sleep on it. It is so much better. And that's really where I just look at this team and I'm like, they were already really tough to stop last year. You add an offensive line to that and you really don't lose anything at receiver. That's promising. Like, that's really scary. I mean, that offensive line couldn't block me last year. So now they could actually block 3 of me now. And now they're going to be able to air it out even more than they did before. And they're going to be able to run it more consistently with a dynamic running back. So that just makes them so much better right there. Defensively, I think they're underrated. I think they're underrated talent-wise, and I think they're underrated scheme-wise specifically. I think what they do in terms of the different looks they can give you and the ways that they can stop both the run and the pass is very, very promising. Dax Hill, I think, is going to be an awesome piece to their secondary as long as they keep Jesse Bates. And then on top of that, their defensive line adds a couple pieces, specifically in terms of they lost a couple last year to injury that they get back. And Logan Wilson's good. The secondary, I think, is deeper now through the draft. And they've got more chemistry as a unit as well. So that's always nice to see. I think the Bengals might not replicate their postseason success and run and magical thing that they did a year ago. But I do feel like they're better on paper. So that's why I put them at number 4. Entering the top 3, at number 3, I got the Super Bowl champs, the reigning, defending Los Angeles Rams, Matthew Stafford. I hope he's sober right now. I still don't know if he has recovered after the parade. But Matthew Stafford, he deserved the ring. He got it. And now he has to defend it. Now, my biggest questions with the Rams are, can they replicate what they did last year? Everything kind of fell into place. They were healthy. They got the right additions at the right time. And I do feel like they're kind of sitting back and they're relaxed and they're chilling and they're not really putting all the work in. And that's just kind of the sense that I feel like the Rams this whole year, the way it's going to be. But when you look at the talent and when you look at what they've done, when you look at the track record so far, it's hard to deny that they're still one of the best teams in the NFL. From getting Allen Robinson to replace Odell, who I don't think is coming back, by the way. The offensive line added some depth in the draft and potentially found some answers for the future. The running back position is strong and deep. Tyler Higbee is good at what he does. Cooper Kupp is unstoppable. Matthew Stafford is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL and probably will be even better this year because, I mean, he's in the second year in McVay's system now. But I will say there's going to be more answers defensively for what they throw at people. And defensively, I do think they're solid. I don't know if they're one of the better defenses in the NFL, but they're around the top 10. You know, they lost Von Miller. They lost some good players, but they added guys like Bobby Wagner, don't forget, and they added back Troy Hill after losing him last offseason, which was nice addition, low-key, through the draft. And I think their interior defensive line is underrated. So I think that the Rams are really, really good and still a contending team. And if they went back-to-back, like, it wouldn't shock me. But I just feel like the vibes might be a little bit different this year. But obviously at power ranking, it's hard to really place anything on that. My number 2 team in the NFL and my number 1 team in the AFC is the Buffalo Bills. The Bills were my number 1 team post free agency and now my number 2 team after some thought and after the draft. The Buffalo Bills are very strong and I have nearly no complaints except for their offensive line, which I still feel like has stayed stagnant. And I do feel like their weaponry, which I want to say they tried to improve, it hasn't improved a ton. I mean, they added Cook, they lost Beasley, they added Crowder back. They still pretty much got the same receiving core on paper. They still pretty much got the same offensive line. They still pretty much got the same backfield. You know, you add Cook again, like I said. But Josh Allen still has to be an absolute animal for them to be productive offensively, which at a certain point is going to backfire. Like, it's got to backfire at a certain point. I know he's amazing. I know he's a monster among men. It's going to hurt in a couple games this year, as we saw even in a game where they lost to the damn Jags. Like, it's going to happen probably because their offense relying on Josh Allen losing his offensive coordinator as well. Defensively, though, I think they're very good. Like, I think their coaching is strong, and I think they, based on last year, number 1 defense in the NFL, although that was kind of a facade. But I will say every team in the NFL didn't have a defense, so there's that. But getting Von Miller just puts them over the top when it comes to crunch time and getting sacks in the playoffs and creating big plays. I do think their depth is better this year, adding somebody like Shaq Lawson back and adding some of their guys that they've had in the past. I think that, as well as the younger guys, getting better and hopefully improving on that defensive line. Linebacker, strong. Secondary, potentially stronger with Elam in the first round to be a number 2 corner, which is an upgrade over Levi Wallace. How long can those safeties stay healthy is a question for me, but they're still playing at a uber high level. So the Buffalo Bills are the favorite for me to go to the Super Bowl in the AFC, but still a lot of pressure on Josh Allen to be the Magic Man. My number 1 team in the NFL is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs are my number 1 team, and honestly, I kind of feel bad for saying this to Rams fans, but I feel like if they were healthy in that game last year, they probably would have won the Super Bowl, and I think a lot of people forget about that. But the Bucs entering this year, you know, they don't have the pressure of repeating. I don't think they're going to be the favorite. And ultimately, they're probably the most talented, well-rounded team, and they let go of an absolute anchor in Bruce Arians. They got Todd Bowles now as their head coach and Byron Leftwich running the offense with no complaints and no red marker on the game plan from Bruce Arians. Tom Brady can run his show the way he wants, which is hallelujah. But you look at the offense, and the offensive line is still strong and arguably the best in football as long as they get good play out of that guard position. Getting Shaq Mason to replace Ali Marpet, and basically a second-round pick or Aaron Stinney to replace Alex Kappa. So it's pretty much a wash there. Tristan Wirfs is the best offensive lineman other than Trent Williams in the NFL, I think you could say. And Gronk will be back. I'm pretty much including that in my analysis here. And Gronk played really well last year. On top of them getting maybe a little bit of an underrated add at tight end in the draft, Russell Gage, don't forget about him at wide receiver. Chris Godwin being back off injury. Mike Evans, having a deeper receiving core with guys like Brashad Perryman, having more time in the offense, who can stretch the field, add speed. Scotty Miller being healthy, on top of also Jalen Darden, second season, and Tyler Johnson. So they got a really deep receiving core, which is always nice to see. They added a legitimate 3-down back through the draft to complement and to back up Leonard Fournette, who's back. And the defense, I think, could be stronger with what they did in the secondary, adding somebody like Logan Ryan and Keanu Neal, and also Logan Hall on the D-line, which Sue is also expected to come back. So the defense, they had a lot of injuries last year, and that honestly kept them from being the number 1 seed in the NFC. And I think that they're going to be healthier this year just out of luck returning to their favor. So the Bucs, to me, would be the favorite and my pick to win the Super Bowl right now. And they're probably the most talented team in the NFL, with arguably the best player still in the NFL at like 4,000 years old in Tom Brady. So those are my power rankings. The Bucs are number 1 for now. We'll see how that develops throughout the offseason. And that is number 32 to number 1. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. It's Mitch. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. Gronk spike the like button. We will see you in the next video. Peace!